Here are the best decks you can build day one, or at least very, very early in your journey with Pokemon TCG Pocket. Hi everybody, Jake, your resident content cowboy here. Yeehaw, let's do this thing. When you're first staring at sort of a blank 20 slots and you're not sure how to build up these decks, I'm going to show you what you can do right away to make some great decks regardless of the pack you are picking. Now, there are specific ones for Mewtwo, Charizard, Pikachu as well, but these are going to work great in pretty much any deck, and I'll show you kind of some variations of how to build them. First, let's talk about a few deck staples. Professor's Research. You get this early, you're going to be able to get more of them from the store. Make sure you have 2 of these. It's in pretty much every deck in the game. The same can be said for the Pokeball card. Giving you a random basic Pokemon from your deck is invaluable. Make sure you have 2 of these in every deck. Another top tier supporter, if you can pull it, is Sabrina. Sabrina will be found in the Charizard pack. Sabrina is amazing, one of the best in the game. In general, a lot of the supporter cards are incredibly good. You also can round out many decks with easy choices like Potion and X-Speed. Retreating is invaluable in some fights, and being able to do it while not losing energy is pretty big. And then Potion, keeping you alive longer, is great. Another card that's a little hit or miss is Red Card. Once you start to understand the game more, there are times where Red Card's amazing. Early on, you actually might be helping your opponents by playing it. So now that we got these 4 cards out of the way, plus any other supporters that you would be looking for, let's talk about some of these cards that you're gonna get right away that are incredible. I'm going to start with a personal favorite card that you may have pulled already, and that is Farfetch'd, a basic Pokemon that requires 1 colorless energy and does 40 damage to your opponents. One of the best cards that you can start with in many decks, especially when you're building and you don't have everything you need for all of the high-end decks. This puts so much pressure on your opponents, and it's easy to get. You find it in all 3 of the packs, so it's likely you'll pull some Farfetch'd very quickly. Another great colorless card that you're going to get early is Meowth. Now, the thing with Meowth is you find it in Charizard, but there's going to be a Meowth event once the game starts, so you'll actually be able to pull this pretty reliably once the game starts in the Wonder Pick event. Meowth is a great card. A lot of decks want to make sure that you draw out everything, especially if you're looking to get that stage 2 online. So this is a really solid basic to start with. The only downside really is if you're not starting the game with it, it's pretty underwhelming. Now let's start building one of our first decks here. This is Sandslash. The amazing thing about Sandslash is it only costs 2 energy to start doing some serious damage. It's not an EX Pokemon, and you find this in every booster pack in the game. A great complement to a fighting deck. To add it to your deck, put a couple of Sandshrews and a couple of Sandslashes in there, and then you're going to look at what else you are pulling from your packs. If you're running the Charizard line, we could easily see you having Machop, Machoke, and Machamp EX, or regular Machamp if you have not yet pulled Machamp EX. This is going to give you 14 cards right here. The rest of your deck you can fill out with things like trainer cards, or possibly a colorless card like Farfetch'd. So here is an example of that deck. Again, we've got Sandshrew into Sandslash, the whole Machamp line, some Potions, some X-Speed, some Pokeballs, Professor's Research, and then 2 other supporter cards, depending on what you've got. I've got a Giovanni and Sabrina in here, but of course you can fill in other supporters that you are able to get into your deck, or like I said, one of those colorless Pokemon like Farfetch'd. Now here we have a variation. If you're pulling the Mewtwo packs, you've probably found Cubone and possibly Marowak EX at this point. So you've got Sandshrew, Sandslash, Cubone, Marowak EX, and a couple of Farfetch'd in this deck, rounding it out with those items and supporters that we talked about earlier. If you're pulling from Pikachu packs, there are a few options in the fighting realm, but you could also go with a colorless option, something like Jigglypuff into Wigglytuff, or even Wigglytuff EX if you've had the ability to pull it so far. Pikachu doesn't make as great of use of Sandslash compared to the others, but it's still a pretty solid deck. And in general, the thought with this deck is Sandslash is really good, and you could build around it in an easy way. The next card I want to talk about building around is Rapidash. Rapidash is really strong, 100 HP, and it only costs 1 fire energy to get online. So if you have a fire deck, this is really solid for letting you set up whatever you want on your bench. And there are a few great options depending on what packs you are picking up. If you're going the Charizard line, Ninetales is just one of my favorite cards in the entire game. You can continue building fire around this as well because both Ninetales and Rapidash are very cheap. Also, if you've pulled Blaine, the supporter card already, you're well on your way to making a super aggro Blaine deck. So here's a version of that deck if you're pulling Charizard with Ponyta into Rapidash, Vulpix into Ninetales, couple of Farfetch, some Potions, some X-Speeds, Pokeballs, Professor's Research, and a Blaine and a Sabrina. Another version of this, of course, is using the Ponyta Rapidash in the front line to power up your Charizard EX in the back line. So this has Charmander, Charmeleon into Charizard, as well as the Ponyta Rapidash. Same kind of supporters. I drop our Blaine and I drop our Sabrina. This is assuming you may not have pulled it. If you do have a Sabrina, you'd probably swap out like the X-Speed or a Potion for it, for sure. Now, this is a version that is completely not specific to any pack. This is Ponyta and Rapidash, as well as a couple of Magmars and a couple of Centiskorches. You can put in a few different things here, right? You could start to put in Moltres EX if you have it, but if you don't, this is a fire deck that doesn't require you to be pulling any specific packs, and it's pretty dang strong. It becomes better and better the more specific cards that you can add to it to power it up. Moltres EX definitely helps with Centiskorch. If you can get Blaine in there for Magmar and for Rapidash, that could be very, very good. If you're looking to build this kind of deck with the Pikachu line, you can go Growlithe into Arcanine and even Arcanine EX. You could have both in your deck so that you could pick one depending on the situation, as well as the Rapidash line. You could drop Farfetch'd if you want. We have it in this deck right now, but you could drop it to add in more supporters. Pikachu and Mewtwo don't do as well as Char with Rapidash, but at the same time, it is a low-cost fire card that works in so many different fire decks, and some really good colorless decks. For these next few decks, I want to highlight two cards. Golduck, which is amazing, cheap. You find it in every pack. It does 70 damage, 90 HP, stage 1, really nice. And then one of my favorites, Frostmoth. It requires 1 water, 1 colorless. It's 40 damage, but you put the opposing Pokemon asleep, which is so mean. You can build this a lot of different ways. Here's looking at it if you've got some of the cards that you would pull from the Pikachu pack, because I have Misty in here. If you don't have Misty, you can replace this with other basic Pokemon, or you could replace this with another trainer Pokemon. 2 Psyducks, 2 Snoms, 2 Golducks, 2 Frostmoths, couple of Farfetch'd. I'll throw another basic at you here in a sec that you could swap in. Few Potions, few X-Speeds, few Pokeballs, Professor's Research, and those Misties. Again, there are a lot of different ways you can go with something like this, but both Golduck and Frostmoth are cheap cards to get online for a water deck, and they're just really powerful. I want to highlight a quick basic Pokemon that ain't too bad. I personally like Farfetch more, but this is Kangaskhan. The nice thing about this is you could actually do 60 damage with it, and it has more HP than Farfetch. I just don't love its high retreat cost, but if you're looking for sort of that basic Pokemon that can fill in a lot of decks early, Kangaskhan is a great call. So this version of this deck is if you happen to be building Pikachu and you found yourself a Blastoise. We've got Squirtle, Wartortle, Blastoise or Blastoise EX alongside the Golducks and the Frostmoths. Potion, X-Speed, couple of Pokeballs, couple of Professor's Research. Now, this version you're going to see here is if you are pulling Charizard packs. This has the Psyduck, Golduck, Snom, Frostmoth, as well as Staryu and Starmie EX. Starmie EX, one of my absolute favorite cards in the game. We also have a couple Potions, Pokeballs, Professor's Research. This deck is low energy cost, extremely aggressive, really fun. Now, this version is if you were pulling a lot of Mewtwo booster packs. We're adding Articuno EX to this deck, as well as Bruxish. Bruxish, actually, you could get in any of the packs. It's a pretty solid card, and we were going to talk about it here in a minute, so I wanted to add it to this deck. Bruxish gives you a lot of damage if your opponents have already taken some damage. It's a tricky card sometimes, but your first round, you're going to deal 10 damage, and if your opponent keeps the card out there, the second round you're going to deal 70 damage. It's extremely powerful, especially if you can get it powered up on the bench and swap it in. Now, of course, we also were just talking about Articuno EX. This is in the Mewtwo pack. If you happen to pull this, it's a really powerful water card that works great with all of these aggressive cards that we're showcasing here. So this deck, Psyduck and a Golduck, Snom and a Frostmoth, a couple of Bruxish, couple of Articuno EXs, and the rest of our trainers. Again, you're going to want to swap in some trainers like Misty, Sabrina, Giovanni. If you have any of those, they're really powerful cards for a deck like this. The next card we're going to talk about that you can build into a lot of decks is Lilligant. Lilligant is in every pack that you can open, and Lilligant is great for grass decks. It costs 2 grass energy, and you are able to add grass energy to any Pokemon on your bench. It's a stage 1, you power it up each turn, solid damage at 50, and really great for powering up a grass team. So this Lilligant deck is based on pulling the Charizard booster pack. You've got Execute into Executor, you've got Petalil into Lilligant, a couple of Pincers, a couple of Executor EXs, and an Executor, Potions, X-Speeds, Pokeballs, Professor's Research, and an Erica if you can find it. The nice thing about this is if you're pulling a lot of Char, you'll have some of these, and Lilligant easily powers up things like Pincer to possibly deal a lot of damage, or even something like Executor. Now, it would be better if you were powering up higher cost grass Pokemon, but also it's just really strong to be attacking and powering up your bench the entire time. If you're pulling from the Mewtwo line, your choice couldn't be simpler. You're running Bulbasaur, Ivysaur, Venusaur, possibly Venusaur EX with Lilligant. This is just a actually huge meta deck that you can build pretty easy in the Mewtwo line because Lilligant's easy to get, and then Venusaur is inside those packs. So this is a solid one. We've also got a couple potions, X-Speeds, Professor's Research. I've got an Erica in case you find it, Sabrina in case you find it. If you don't, throw in some other supporter cards. For the Pikachu booster, your options are a little more limited, but you could run something like Caterpie, Metapod, Butterfree with a Lilligant deck. It's probably your weakest of the 3, but at the same time, it's a simple deck that you can make, and Butterfree is pretty dang fun. A card I wanted to highlight a little more of is Centiskorch because you are able to get it in any Genetic Apex pack. It is going to be a fire deck that you're looking to build here, but if you could set up any type of wall, you could power up a really strong card like Centiskorch for, yes, a lot of energy, but it is not an EX card, so you don't lose a lot when this thing goes down. 130 damage from Centiskorch. A great way to power it up, of course, if you are pulling Charizard, is Moltres EX. If you can get a Moltres EX, Centiskorch powers up with this so well. Get Moltres out there in the active spot, Centiskorch on the bench, and just start leveling your opponents. This deck is going to look a little like this: Ponyta Rapidash, Sizzlipede Centiskorch, and a couple of Moltres. The rest are going to be your supporter cards. Now, if you're not able to grab Moltres, I think that's okay. You could still play this pretty easily with Farfetch'd in there. You just need to power up your bench. Both Farfetch'd and Rapidash are attacking for 1 energy, so you can take that time to get Centiskorch powered up and ready to go and start sweeping the opposing team. Another cool Pokemon I wanted to highlight was Zebstrika. The thing I really like about Zebstrika is that you are able to do good damage to your opponent and to your opponent's bench for only 1 energy. You are going to pair this with a lot of lightning type decks, so let me show you a few options depending on what packs you're going to pull. An extremely powerful deck would be based around Pikachu EX. Now, you might not be lucky enough to have multiple Pikachu EXs yet, but if you could, a couple of those, a couple of Electrodes, a couple of Voltorbs make this a very, very powerful deck. Without the luck for Pikachu EX, you could have the Voltorb Electrode, a couple of Electabuzzes, and then your Zebstrikas. This deck does not require a lot of energy, and you're doing some pretty solid damage to your opponents. You are missing that Pikachu EX, though. It would be nice to have it. This deck is super generic in that every single booster you're going to open could give you this deck. So we've got Blitzel into Zebstrika, we've got the Heliolisk line, and we also have a couple of Farfetch'd. No matter what packs you're opening, you have the opportunity to build something like this deck. Of course, the trainers and supports you could move around depending on what you're able to pick up. This next one isn't going to be a deck, but it's just going to be a card that I'd like to highlight, and that is Arbok. It's a very strong, dark card. You are cornering your opponents and they are not able to retreat from that active spot. This pairs really well with a couple of the cards in the game that would poison. Things like that are very, very powerful. They can't get away from it. You also can play this with a Pidgeot deck that is really cool. In general, the only issue with this is a lot of the decks you would build for it want you to be pulling specific packs, like a Mewtwo pack pairs really well with Arbok, but Pikachu Charizard doesn't pair as well. Still a really great card that you can get in any pack. So there you go. There are a lot of decks that you can build super early in the game with cards that you find in any pack. And I tried to give you some variations that you could piece together depending on the packs you pick up. Of course, if you don't have all the cards that I'm looking at, try to find a great facsimile for some of those cards. You know, if you need a slot in a Lapras in a water deck for a basic card, something like that works really well. I hope this was helpful. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. I love you. I'll see y'all next time. We did it.